Hi guys, welcome back. We're going to finish out chapter 7. This is the section 3. It's on the domains and the properties of their kingdoms. On your test, you'll need to know the properties of what makes each of the 3 domains. You'll need to know the key characteristics of all of the 6 kingdoms. I'll give you some characteristics. You'll tell me what kingdom that refers to, or sometimes it can be more than one kingdom depending on the most specific taxon. Species. Classification systems change as scientists learn more. We're constantly finding new organisms. We're constantly finding out new things about the ancestors of organisms. We are constantly looking at new evidence. We're running the biological evidence, but we're getting all of this DNA evidence, the genetic evidence. So taxonomy isn't ongoing. It is never ending. It's going to keep going and going and going. As long as we find new information, or as long as we find new species, we're going to have to keep the science of taxonomy going. When I first started teaching, there was no such thing as the domains. They've added the 3 domains. Another example, there was a kingdom called Monera. In fact, I have science books that talk about the kingdom Monera. The kingdom Monera has now been broken down into bacteria and archaea. And some of the newer books don't even call it bacteria anymore. They call it eubacteria, which means true bacteria. There is a level that has been added. We call that the domain. Basically, the domains were added because of how the DNA works in the different ones. Bacteria tend to be all by themselves when it comes to how their bacteria and proteins work. Archaea leads into what we eventually will call the eukaryotes. But archaea and bacteria are prokaryotic. Prokaryotic means that it does not have a nuclear envelope. Eukarya, or eukaryote, as we've had in the past, means that that organism does have a nucleus. There are 6 kingdoms. I have a video that goes with almost every single one that talks about their traits. As we go through this, make sure that you pause this video, open up your notes, and watch the videos so that they reinforce what I'm talking about. The first kingdom is the kingdom bacteria. The traits of a bacteria, they are unicellular. They have one cell. They don't have many cells, they have one cell. They do not have a nucleus. All bacteria reproduce by binary fission. Some bacteria can make you sick, like strep throat, like Staphylococcus pneumonitis. But there are other types of bacteria that are really, really good. There's bacteria in the soil that decomposes dead stuff. There's nitrogen-fixing bacteria that puts nitrogen to help the plants grow. There are bacteria like E. coli that are in your intestines that actually protect you from things. And then there's all of the bacteria that we use to make certain foods. Yogurt is made with a type of bacteria where we culture milk. It could be things like chocolate that actually has to ferment from the bacteria in the sun to get its flavor. It can be sour cream, which is milk that has bacteria in it and allows it to change it to a lactic acid flavor. So as you see, there's a lot of bad bacteria. There's also a lot of good bacteria at the same time. Archaea. We know the least about archaea. This was the last kingdom to be added. We didn't even know they existed until the 70s when they finally went to the bottom of the ocean and they found them. They used to classify archaea as blue-green algae, but they're not algae because algae are protists and protists have a nucleus. Then they tried to put archaea as archaea bacteria. They were called archaea bacteria because they were, eventually they'd be called cyanobacteria. But now they're in their own kingdom because there are some that are photosynthetic. There are some that live in the most horrible places like the mouth of a volcano. There are some that live in the Great Salt Lakes. There are some that live thousands of feet down in the crust of the earth where it's way too hot and way too much pressure for anything else to live. There are even bacteria on the bottom of the ocean that are actually the basis of the food web on the very bottom of the ocean. The kingdom Protista are a group of protists. There's 3 of these. Now, with the kingdom of Protista, there is a plan, and I bet before I retire that they've actually broken up the kingdom Protista into a different kingdom. So if you're working along and you were trying to like make a flow chart, so we have Archaea, and then bacteria are out here all by themselves because they kind of do their own thing. The next kingdom to evolve was Protista. Well, in the kingdom Protista, there are 3 types. You have the protozoans. These are animal-like. You have the algae. These ones are plant-like. I'm sure you guys have had pools that turn green or fish tanks that turn green. And then the final group are the slime molds. And slime molds are what we call fungus-like. Well, so archaea are what we think were on Earth first. Bacteria kind of veered off, and there may have even been at the exact same time. Archaea evolved into Protista. The kingdom Protista probably someday will be broken into protozoa, algae, and slime mold kingdoms of their own. We do believe that the protozoans, which have to move around and find food, they're animal-like, eventually evolve into Animalia. The algae, which are plant-like, eventually evolve into the kingdom Plantae. And the slime molds, which were fungus-like, eventually become the fungi. Most protists are single-celled. They lack a lot of the structures. They're not the only ones that are going to be multicellular are types of algae. There's some brown algae. They do have a nucleus, though. This is slime mold. It is called the dog vomit slime mold. And it really does look like it is a decomposer. It lives in the woods. It's not uncommon to find it if you know what you're looking for. That is an amoeba. These are protozoans. They are animal-like. This one would move around and actually trap food particles and kill them. In fact, amoebas are known to feed on these. These are paramecium. Paramecium are unicellular, and they use little tiny hairs around the edges here that would actually allow them to move and capture food. The fungi. Fungi are multicellular plant-like organisms that lack chlorophyll. This one's really important because the fungus were classified as plants for a long period of time until someone said, wait a second, they can't be plants, they're not photosynthetic. So they've moved them into their own kingdom, the yeasts, the molds, and the mushrooms. All fungi except yeasts are multicellular. Yeast, if your mom makes bread or any type of dough that has to rise, often she will use a type of yeast. It feeds on the sugars and releases carbon dioxide that makes the bread rise. They're all decomposers. Fungi have a cell wall. They do not have chloroplasts. They're all decomposers. The kingdom Plantae. Here's a bunch of plants you're probably really familiar. All plants are multicellular. All plants are photosynthetic. They all have a cell wall, a nucleus, and they all have chloroplasts somewhere to be a plant. Those are the descriptions. Then we have the kingdom Animalia, which is us. Animalia are multicellular organisms. You cannot be single-celled. You must move around to find food. You have a cell nucleus, but not a cell wall. You do not have chloroplasts if you're an animal. We do not make our own food by photosynthesis. As environments change, organisms will continue to evolve into new species. When you watch this video, it is on the peppered moths in England around the turn of the 1900s. Right about the time of the Industrial Revolution, all of these peppered moths were almost white. They lived on the bark of trees that were very, very white. During the Industrial Revolution, there were factories everywhere in England and everything burned coal. I grew up in Glendale. In Glendale, where I grew up, we had a coal furnace. You put off black soot all over everything. And they found that this black soot actually caused the trees around the factories to turn kind of a black gray. And basically, when you were done, so you may have had a tree like this, and there's a black phase of the moth. Well, that stands out really well, so the birds would eat it. But when the tree turns black, it blends in much, much better than a white moth would. See how that white moth stands out? The white moths were getting eaten. Eventually, we had the Clean Air Act. The Clean Air Act made them stop and start filtering out the smoke from their smokestacks of the factories, and the trees in England have started to go back to being light-colored again. The pepper moths that were white developed into a black moth because the trees turned black. Actually, over the last 50 years, have turned back to being mostly white again. All right, guys, let me run down real quick things that we covered today. You had the 3 domains. The 3 domains are archaea, bacteria, and eukarya. Archaea and bacteria, no nucleus. Eukarya, true nucleus. We went through the traits of the kingdoms. You have bacteria, no nucleus. Single cell, binary fission. We went into archaea, single-celled, no nucleus. And they always say that they live in extreme places. Volcanoes, mouths of hot springs, sulfur water, salt water, places like that. We went into Protista. Protista could easily be broken into 3 groups. You have that they are mostly single-celled. They all have a nucleus. Some of them can go through photosynthesis. We went into fungi. The fungi are your mushrooms, molds, and yeasts. Mushrooms have a nucleus. Mushrooms have a cell wall. They do not have chlorophyll. All fungi are decomposers. We went into plantae. Plantae are multicellular. They have chloroplasts and chlorophyll, and they all have photosynthesis. And then finally, we hit Animalia. Animalia are all multicellular. They have to find their own food. They're heterotrophs. And they do not have a cell wall or chloroplast.